Are you ready to get a bit nosy with your caricatures? This is Jensen with the ToonHeadz, and in this video, I'll be showing you my techniques on how to sniff out ways to caricature noses. And who knows, maybe these techniques will jump out at you? Okay, who wrote this crap? The nose is the anchor of the face, and by drawing it, you establish the middle of the face, allowing you to easily coordinate all the other facial features around it. So I'll be breaking down everything I look out for when it comes to drawing noses. So here are 5 tips I use when I start caricaturing a nose. Number 1, sections. When preparing to draw a nose, it's helpful to look at it in just one general shape, sort of like this. And once you find that general shape, it helps to break it down into sections, sort of like this. Finding these shapes will help you exaggerate the nose further and make more creative designs. When breaking down the shapes of the nose, you want to look at these sections: the bridge, the bulb, and the wings. Break down these sections into simplified shapes to come up with more creative and exaggerated noses. Number 2, caricaturistics. When breaking the nose down into sections, you'll notice each section having its own characteristic. These characteristics are size, angles or curves, and protrusion. So the first characteristic to look out for is size. This refers to the dimensions of each section of the nose. The bridge may be the shortest part, while the bulb can be the largest. Considering each section's size will help you determine what section to exaggerate on the nose. And you don't always have to exaggerate big. You can actually exaggerate really small. Now the next characteristic is angles and curves. The shape of each nose section can vary, often being either curved or angular. For example, the bridge can be triangular, while the bulb and wings are circular, or vice versa. Be attentive to each section either having angled or curved shapes. And the last characteristic is protrusion. Now, believe it or not, different sections of the nose can protrude or recess. While most noses generally extend outward, some sections of the nose may protrude more than others. And with caricature, you want to pull or push those features. For instance, a bridge can actually have more protrusion than the bulb. And believe it or not, sometimes the wings might actually protrude more than all the other sections of the nose. Recognizing which section protrudes helps challenge the assumption that the bulb is always the furthest point from the face. Number 3, direction. Direction helps determine the angle of a feature by visually tracing the contour of the nose. View the nose from a 3/4 or side profile angle, starting at the bridge and tracing down to the bulb and wings. The shapes, curves, or angles you notice can be used to exaggerate the flow for that feature. Some noses will angle upward, while others will angle downward. You can emphasize this more by understanding what direction the nose is flowing. For example, looking at this reference, you will notice the general shape turning up, which is good, but when you trace the direction of the whole feature, you will notice the bridge of the nose curving slightly down, which is something you will need to incorporate into the drawing to ensure it still resembles that feature. So, if you want to exaggerate the nose further or stylize it more, consider giving direction a try to come up with more creative designs. Number 4, exaggeration. Exaggeration is key in caricature, but it works in harmony with other facial features. Drawing the nose just by itself does not actually portray how big or small it is. It just portrays you drew a nose. Yet, when you coordinate smaller and bigger features around the nose, you're able to convey your exaggerations. If you were to make the same size features coordinated around the nose, then your nose is not expressing as much exaggeration. So if you want a feature to look bigger, draw all the other features smaller. And this is something I just want to emphasize when caricaturing just one specific feature. You're unable to fully caricature one feature without considering all the surrounding features. Number 5, trends. Trends are combinations, patterns, are correlations that different noses will have. Some of these trends are simple, like downturned noses are going to hide the shape of the nostrils, while upturned noses are going to show more nostrils. And there are hundreds of trends that you can find for yourself just by analyzing noses. And in doing live caricature, you get a first-hand lesson in recognizing these patterns. Understanding trends can also make you conscious of features that are actually breaking patterns. Spotting these will quickly help you recognize and capture that uniqueness in your drawing. So be observant and look for what is unique, as each person is truly unique. And if you found this video helpful, I would love to hear your feedback. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more caricaturing tips. I knows you will like it. They told me that they gave me $5 to say it. I knows you will like it. And this is AJ Jensen saying thanks for tuning in and keep drawing.